the last part of a very engaging conversation that you're having and begin to come forward to take our seats for the 9th Ferguson Commission meeting. Thank you. We're going to wait a few moments as our commissioners convene. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We're going to start tonight with a quick call to order. This is the 9th Ferguson Commission meeting that's being called to order now by Bethany Johnson-Javois, yours truly, here at Clayton High School, located number 1 Mark Twain Circle, Clayton, Missouri. Commissioners who are in attendance tonight behind me, would you please state present as your name is called? Reverend Starsky Wilson. Present. Rich McClure. Present. Kevin Albrand has an excused absence tonight. Commissioner Rasheen Aldridge, I see you, so I know that you're present. Pastor Tracy Blackman. Gabe Gore. Becky James Hatter. Dan Isom. Scott Negwer. Brittany Packnett. Felicia Pulliam. Pat Sly. Grayling Tobias has an excused absence for this evening. Byron Watson. And Rose Windmiller. Thank you so much for the call to order. At this time, we are very happy. I have to say, we understand that what high school did you go to in some circles and settings is a very charged and loaded statement. But I just have to break that for a second because this is my high school. So I want to say, yeah, you can clap too because you're from Clayton. I want to say how grateful I am to be back at Clayton High School. One of the reasons why I'm actually standing here in the mic. And I'd also like to do while I'm here to introduce the Clayton School District Superintendent, Dr. Sharman Wilkinson. If you would please come to welcome us here tonight. Please receive her. Thank you.
Good evening. As was said, I serve Clayton School District as the Superintendent of Schools, and my name is Sharman Wilkinson. And it is indeed my pleasure, on behalf of the Board of Education, our students, teachers, parents, and the entire Clayton community, to welcome the members of the Ferguson Commission and your guests to Clayton High School. In Clayton, we believe that our schools and our community are learning environments. Our students, teachers, parents, and community members embrace the opportunity to learn from and with each other. Our vision for our students seeks to develop leaders who shape the world through independence, creativity, and critical thinking. We work to educate, to inspire, and to empower. Our role is not unlike the one that lies before the members of this commission. Each of you serve on this commission because you're leaders. Individually and collectively, you endeavor to shape something vital and transformational. Independence, creativity, and critical thinking will be foundational on your journey to successfully fulfill the charge set forth for you. Your work to chart a new path toward healing and positive change for the residents of the St. Louis region will require listening, learning, and building on the collective efforts of the many who have invested themselves in this process. I, along with many others who are following the work of this commission, eagerly await your recommendations and stand ready to do our part to make the region a stronger place for everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilkinson. At this time, we have a treat that is before us. We were reached out to by the Atonement Lutheran Preschool class, who is in the front row to my right, under the direction of Karen Riles. They would like to sing a song for us as our opening selection tonight called Caring, Sharing. May I please ask you to join us in a round of applause and a selection from Atonement Lutheran Preschool class. We would be so honored if commissioners could take a photo with the young children. Would that be okay with the parents in the room? Okay, I think we have a green light to do so. Yes.
What a wonderful job by the Atonement Lutheran Preschool class. Thank you so much for being here, for your parents, and for your teachers. We are so grateful. Thank you again. My name is Rich McClure. I'm one of the co-chairs of the commission, and Bethany, being unwilling to follow that act, pushed me right up here and said, it's your turn. because I don't know what really more can be said. The phrases from the song, "We all must take care of each other, caring and sharing," summarizes our work most appropriately. So thank you for starting us off in such an extraordinary fashion. Tonight, the Commission's work focuses on developing policy recommendations that seek to address the root causes of systemic and structural inequities in our region. And as such, our focus is on institutional and structural racism. We've learned together that racism exists on multiple levels. We heard at our last Commission meeting from the Kellogg Foundation, America's Healing Framework, and we looked at that national model. Tonight's breakout sessions are going to focus on individual levels. In addition to our need to address institutional and structural issues, we must reflect on how each of us individually must be personally impacted by the thoughts about racial inequity and racism and how it impacts our interactions with others. So our time together tonight, while it's brief, we hope we can plant some seeds of awareness and understanding on how we can build future skills and action. So we want to acknowledge Rudy Nickens and Dr. Kara Banks and the team of small group facilitators who are here tonight and have worked with the Commission over the past month to design tonight's experience. So as we have in the past, we're going to start with polling and understanding who's here and some facilitated communication. Bethany's going to present the findings from the last meeting, and so we would like to call on Jerica from Vector Communications. And Jerica is not going to do, Jerica going to do this, or Dan? I'm sorry, Monique is going to do this. Okay, you ready? Monique Thomas.
That was amazing. Wasn't it amazing, y'all? Great. So we're going to start off with polling. To do that, it's our tradition, our practice to get a sense of who's in the room. So we have a demographic set of questions and then topical considerations. And so if we can start giving those out, passing those out. Does everyone have a keypad already? So raise your hand if you don't have a keypad. Okay, so we'll get that going. So we have less than 10 questions for tonight, but just generally, just so, has anyone not used a keypad before? Okay, that's fine. You can raise it higher. It's okay. So it's a safe space. So generally, I just want you all to look at your keypad. You'll see that you have 10 letters and 10 numbers on the keypad. Those are places where you will have answers, and answers will correspond with those specific either letters or numbers. So we'll have a test question, a practice question to get you ready. So let's go to that practice question. So I'll ask this question, and then I'll give you a chance to indicate the number or letter that corresponds most closely with your truth, that answer choice that best fits you. So right now you'll see to the top right-hand corner, there's a polling close indicator. So if you're entering numbers or letters right now, it won't plug in. So I'll let you know when polling is open and then when it's closed. It'll enter the last answer you've given. So for whatever reason, if you change your answer last minute, the last one is what will be captured, okay? So polling is closed, but if we can open polling now. So polling's now open. The question is, what is your favorite color? A is black, B is brown, C is blue, D is green, E, orange, F, purple, G is red, H, yellow, I, white, J, other. Okay? Looks like we're still entering it. Have in the bottom corner, you'll see how many seconds we have left before it's closed. 4 seconds left. And now it jumps to red, indicating that polling is closed. And so 24, about a quarter of you have indicated that blue is your favorite color. That's pretty consistent with the last time. So that's fine, that's great. So that's a practice question, okay? And so we're going to dive into the other questions. So we'll start again demographically, and then for tonight, we are setting up for the next meeting. So there's some cases where we have topics that help us with today's content. This will be helping us with next meeting's content around health, okay? So let's go to this next one. In what demographic, are you ready? All right, you look ready, okay, that's fine. In what demographic area is your primary home or residence located? A, St. Louis City, B, St. Louis County, C, St. Charles County, D, Jefferson County, E, Franklin County, F, St. Clair County, G, Madison County, H, Monroe County, and I is other if it's not represented there. All right, polling is open. About 10 seconds left. All right. Polling is closed. Okay, about 50% of you are from St. Louis City, 41 St. Louis County is 51%, St. Louis City 41%, and the rest, that minority is kind of throughout the other other geographic areas. So that's good. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, in what geographic area is your primary work or school? Or school, okay? And for the case if you're retired, you can put other, okay? You can open it up. A, the city, B, the county, St. Louis that is, C, St. Charles County, D, Jefferson County, E, Franklin County, F, St. Clair County, G, Madison County, H, Monroe County, and I, other. About 5 seconds left. Okay, so consistent, fairly. 44% St. Louis County, 39%, 4 out of 10 they work or they go to school in the city. Okay, next question. With what gender do you identify? So select one. A would be female, B is male, C is other, and then D is decline. Polling is now open. About 10 seconds left. Okay. Polling is closed. 67% of us are female, 33 male. How would you describe your ethnicity or race? A is white, B, black, African American, C, Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin, D, Asian, E, American Indian or Alaska Native, F, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, G, other, and H is decline. Polling is now open. About 15 seconds left. Great. Polling's closed. 62, 6 out of 10 of you are white, 21% black African American, 10% Asian, 8% other. So next question, in what age group do you belong? We like to note this is self-identified and anonymous, so please be truthful. Okay, it's fine. It's A is 21 and under, B 22 to 34, C 35 to 44, D is 45 to 54, E is 55 to 64, F is 65 and over, and then G is decline. So polling is now open. Oh, you guys are just willing, okay. So we have fairly, not evenly distributed, but we have, it's split between 22 and 44 years old, about 40%. We have 22 between 45 and 55, and then we have 55 and over seem to be about, 26, 30, over 40%. All right, let's go to the next. So this is the 8th meeting of the Ferguson Commission. How many previous meetings have you attended? Now, working group meetings do not count here, okay? But we appreciate you attending working group meetings as well. So now you can just indicate the number you've attended for the full Ferguson Commission meeting. A, none. This is your first one. B, 1 to 2. C, 3 to 4. D, 5 to 6. E, 7 to 8. Polling is open. So most of you, this is your first time, welcome. 54% have never attended another one. Then we have 20% who've done 3 to 4. And then we have a fateful 7% who've done all of them. Thank you for your commitment. All right, so now we're going to go to the topical considerations, bringing us into the next meeting, which is health. Okay? So the text is a little small, so I'll read them slower, okay? The answer choices. So what 3 issues have the greatest impact on our community's health and well-being? A, insurance. B, ability to pay for health services. C, environmental hazards like air pollution. D, neighborhood safety. E, distance to the health care provider. F, ability to understand and use health information. G, access to fresh fruits and vegetables. H, stress. I, health care that is sensitive to cultural differences. And so you're able to put 3 in. Polling is now open. Fifteen seconds left. Okay, it's closed. So it looks like our highest, our top 3 look like ability to pay for health services is top, followed by neighborhood safety, followed by insurance coverage. Okay. So the next question focuses on impact. What 3 issues have the greatest impact on our community's ability to access healthcare services? Okay. A, having health insurance. B, cost of healthcare. C, transportation. D, finding a provider, doctor that will see you. E, understanding how to find your way through the healthcare system. F, physician/health center hours of operation. G, being able to get time off from work. H, length of time, or days or weeks, to see physician after appointments made. Polling is now open. Again, select 3. About 20 seconds left. Okay, it's closed. So it looks like a quarter of you are saying the top 3 issues rather would be cost of healthcare, followed by having health insurance, and then looks like, if I can see it, understanding how to find understanding how to find your way through the healthcare system. So navigation are the top 3. So that concludes it. Thank you for participating. So with this, if you could again take your keypad and raise it up high. High, that's it, that's good. So we are going to be collecting those keypads. They don't do anything else but operate this. So we're going to swiftly collect them. We thank you for giving that in. They get lost all the time without us doing this. So I appreciate you collecting them, and we'll be going down the hallways with it. Thank you again. And now I'm going to be giving it to Bethany Johnson-Javois, our managing director, who will be doing polling, a recap from the last polling, and some of the content that came out of the smaller groups.
Thank you. Every crowd has a different flavor, and this crowd is a clapping crowd. I appreciate that. What I'd like to do is to direct your attention to the right of the screen, to the commissioners as well, to talk about the summary. Many of you are new here. For each commission session, we'd like to do a brief recap of the learning that we've had from the small breakout groups that has been part of our work. And so tonight, it's focusing on racial equity and reconciliation. So again, like you did tonight, we did electronic polling as well, and you can see that according to last time that we met, almost 9 of 10 attendees reside in either St. Louis County or St. Louis City. 8 of 10 attendees work or attended school in either St. Louis County or St. Louis City. And the gender distribution, a little bit more female than male last time that we met. And an equal proportion of attendees that identified as black or white. However, in the smaller categories, it's about 18%. We are seeing a little bit more in that last meeting of people of color not identifying as black than we have in the past. And age distribution of attendees, you can see here, 35 to 44 were 19%, 56 to 64, 26%, pretty evenly distributed, with the smaller, the 22 to 34 years distribution of age. So results of racial equity and reconciliation recap. We asked the question, and this is the response that we found. 94% of attendees reported they do not avoid conversations about race. The majority of attendees that came do not believe reverse discrimination exists. However, you can see that there is some disparity within those numbers as well. 4 of 10 attendees are confident racial and ethnic relations will improve in the St. Louis region, which is a bit higher than what the national average is. And here we asked 2 questions which we got a lot of feedback about, and I too thought was interesting. First question, 72% agreed on focusing on black and white relations, and in the subsequent question, nearly 80% agreed that moving beyond black and white relations was also important. And so we see that as an and, that black and white relations is important, and the need to focus beyond that is also very important to us. 51% strongly disagreed that the Commission's work should be achieving a colorblind society. Practically all in attendance, literally 99%, this is as close to consensus as we probably will get, did not believe the civil rights era eliminated all racial barriers. Almost 8 of 10 attendees agree or strongly agree people of color do, in fact, carry negative beliefs about themselves and their race. 95% of attendees believe white people experience benefits and privileges that are not afforded to people of color. Almost 3 of 4 attendees had a definition of racism that equaled prejudice plus power. And then you can see the other percentages of other definitions: 10% overt discrimination against persons or groups, 11% negative attitudes and behavior, and 5% defined it as prejudice. 8 of 10 attendees defined privilege as systemic advantage last time we met. And now we're in the public discussion. So in the breakout groups, this is the summary of what we heard came back. First, within the public open mic, we heard comments that range within 3 specific areas: a call for healing. Number 2, the impact of the economic gap, which is a crisis that needs to be addressed. And the third area of public open comment was the need for innovation in diversity. I'll let you read that for half a second. We'll keep it on the screen. Thank you. So within the frame of racial equity and reconciliation, the first question that we posed: if you could imagine a St. Louis that actively promoted and supported public discourse on racism, in your opinion, what would that look like? And the responses that we found came into these categories: dedicated and intimate community. Creating opportunities to create, play, and build relationships was important. That spaces must be intimate and transformative and safe. It must include members of the faith community. The second area of interest was comfort, to lean into the discomfort. Encourage discomfort to get to core issues, but we also have to create safe spaces so that people can get real and be honest about their feedback. And third, an important priority area is to engage youth in school systems by creating courses that teach student racial equity as early as pre-K, by mandating classes in civics again, and ensuring educators are trained for these very in-depth topics. The next question, if you can imagine a St. Louis that actively promoted and supported public discourse on racism, in your opinion, what would it look like? Continued, innovate and incentivize communication. We've got to go beyond the choir that we're preaching to. Encourage people to participate in racial dialogue, to include discussion around transportation and food. Let's not talk about race for race's sake. Have guided and structured conversations that can be moderated in person or virtually using technology. Consistent theme of challenging the media bias and the need to address the implicit media bias. Brought into a true regional discussion and dialogue, which we're hopeful that tonight plants a seed within that arena, and one that didn't fit into a category but we thought was important to include in the feedback, need to live a life modeling inclusivity. We can't just talk about it, gotta be about it. The next one, what would your personal contribution to healing look like? So getting out of the systemic realm into what can I personally do? The first is address implicit bias in institutional policies by monitoring, by advocating to elected officials, by using our personal voice and agency. I can educate healthcare and educational systems where some of the inequity is playing out. Confront my own bias, which is the self-awareness work, which is so important. I can acknowledge it. I can challenge cultural norms and my own patterns and behavior, where I eat, where I shop, where I take my children, for example. And third, honor reconciliation 24/7. I can call out inappropriate comments in ways that may be so in a way that can be heard. Maybe some are unheard and this can be heard. I can help support youth activism and the priorities that young people have set in communities in ways that perhaps others can't do. And third, I can use the golden rule. Media, communication, and arts is a mechanism with which many talked about was very important in personal contribution through stories, through art spaces, through media as well. Be open and showing empathy. Sounds simple, but what we heard from our audience was I can smile and I can say hello. I can be authentic and I can reinforce a spirit of cooperation. Next category, to promote racial dialogue and healing. The program specifically was called out, promoting witnessing whiteness programs. I can get people engaged in dialogue, and I can talk to and teach each other about systemic racism with an emphasis on commonalities in the process. Okay? Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your feedback. Just wanted you to know that in every session, we incorporate your thoughts, and these thoughts are posted on the stlpositivechange.org website under the Meetings tab, where you can always download these for your use as well. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So as you can see on your agenda, now is the public open mic session. There were a few of individuals who participated and included their name inside of our fishbowl. And so we will go ahead and start. This will allow for the public to speak with the commissioners a little bit about their general opinion, comments, suggestions, opinions. We will also take note of this, so please note that we are hearing everything that you're saying and recommending it. Yes, sir. I'm sorry? If we do have time, I will be sure, as these individuals did already, put their name in the jar, okay? You will have 2 minutes. I will have a timer up here, and I am watching, okay? We will start with Rena Carroll. Please forgive me if I mispronounced your name. Rena. And right after Rena, we will have Ruth Meyer. So just be on standby. And after Ruth, we will have Carolyn Fan. Also, please introduce yourself, name, first name, last name, and city or organization that you are with.
Good evening. My name is Rena Hajat Carroll. I'm the Executive Director of the Diversity Awareness Partnership. I live in the city of St. Louis, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all tonight about some of the wonderful resources in this community that have been doing diversity and anti-bias work for the last 2 decades. We'd like to submit a letter to the Commission from all of the organizations that I'm going to list in a second, and at this time, I'd like to read 2 sections of that letter. On behalf of the Anti-Defamation League and A World of Difference Institute, Diversity Awareness Partnership, Focus St. Louis, NCCJ St. Louis, the YWCA, and area diversity practitioner Khatib Waheed, we'd like to present the following. We believe dismantling racism in our community is the first step. However, we are clear that this takes a continuum of efforts, including awareness building, training, listening, and healing. The organizations around the table have consistently offered opportunities both locally and nationally, and are prepared to do more as we continue to rebuild our city. We believe that it is possible for all people in our community to feel safe and protected wherever they may be. Our community has very clearly experienced a deficiency of meaningful social justice dialogue and understanding for people affected by social, racial, and economic inequity. We believe the first step on the journey to build a community free of racial fear and tension begins with talking with, not to or through, each other. Again, on behalf of Karen Oresti from the Anti-Defamation League, myself, Yemi Akande from Focus St. Louis, David Martineau from NCCJ St. Louis, Adrian Bracey from the YWCA, and area practitioner Khatib Waheed, we submit this letter to you to make you aware that our resources exist. We are here, we are committed to doing this work, and we are happy to be a resource for you in any way that we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Rena. And Ruth?
I'm Ruth Meyer. I'd like to speak to my white brothers and sisters. If we could just play for a moment and reverse roles. Since we whites, judge ourselves by our best examples and judge African Americans by their worst, for this example, we'll say, okay, we'll think of the people that have been shooters in high schools like Columbine, grade school like Newtown. All of those shooters are white males. So by your worst example, I see 4 people here that are inherently violent. You are white males. Now, African Americans, that's not true. I mean, that's not so. We're going to have you now, there's not going to be racism towards us. So if anything were to happen towards an African American, we would say, well, I wonder what that would be like, because that's not African Americans. There must be the environment, or maybe it's a parent, but that's not who they are. But again, my white brothers and sisters, you see, if we talked about the best example, and that's what we do for whites, and African Americans is the worst example, but if we were to reverse it and make the whites the worst example, then you fit the description. And you would have to be monitored, especially by the police, because there's an inherent violence within you. It's a natural part of who you are, right? Because you're the worst example, and that's the only way we judge. If we reverse what we do, we whites do, and we reversed it. I haven't lost you on this? No, good. So what would we do? Well, we will have to keep a close eye on you, have to monitor you. You do fit the description, and very important, since you are inherently flawed, you don't ever get input in what is the norm and what would be the ideal that all would have to strive for. That would only be African Americans that would tell us what would be the ideal, because you see, we have this inherently flawed violence in the white male. I hope that helps. Thanks.
And Carolyn, am I pronouncing it right? Caroline, I'm sorry.
Thank you for being here with us tonight. My name is Caroline Fan. I am president of OCA St. Louis. It is an Asian American organization here in St. Louis, and we've been around for 42 years. So I was actually up in Ferguson in the fall working closely with a number of the Asian American businesses who were deeply impacted. And my husband and I moved here about 9 months ago from New York City. And so what I was doing with them was helping them apply for loans and grants, to rebuild their businesses even before the major conflagrations had happened. I guess what I'm curious about, considering that Asian Americans here in Missouri, according to the census, have actually increased by 62% in the past 10 years alone, is what kind of in-language outreach is being done to immigrant communities by the Ferguson Commission, because race in America is, lived beyond just black and white. And then the other thing I would like to say is, as part of our efforts to be a civically minded organization, here we are doing a joint event with OBS and Better Family Life the weekend of May 30th and 31st around Asian American, African American solidarity from the civil rights movement to the present. And I would encourage folks here in the audience to join us. Lastly, I did notice that the resources which were very thoughtfully put together for us tonight do not list an Asian American organization as a resource, so I'd like to offer OCA St. Louis as that resource. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have time to go ahead and complete the public open mic. We will have Edmund Acosta, and after Edmund, K.L. Williams. And then if we also have time, sir, then I will also provide the mic. If we have time, I will also provide the mic for you as well, okay? So if we could have Edmund Acosta, please introduce yourself to the commissioners and where you're from or what organization you may be with, okay?
Thanks. Might I have line of sight on you for 2 minutes?
Sure.
Thank you. Just join me up here. Okay. My name is Edmund Acosta. I'm a retired economist. I'm a retired civil servant economist, and I live in University City. 3 topics. The topics are early education. Second one is voter rate participation. And the other one is how to possibly inject the topics and findings of the commission into the national elections that are upcoming in a couple of years. We have some gems of ideas and thoughts and challenges right here that will be articulated, but how can that be extended into to something akin to how the Department of Justice report became something really important for the entire country. So for education, especially education, early education, how can individuals help beyond the school environment, beyond the school contexts? Through conversations here, I'm sure we have plenty of ideas for and knowledge of entities such as libraries, such as the Science Academy that's out there, whose own mission is to engage youth. And thanks for Superintendent Wilkinson for mentioning critical thinking. So within early education, the more we can do with regard to early reading, arithmetic, and critical thinking, well, we have a nice foundation. Kudos to, 20 seconds, kudos to all of those involved in raising the voter participation rate in the recent election in Ferguson. So I'd love to have your suggestions, your thoughts, your ideas as to how to increase that. And of course, similarly, what are some ideas by which we could make this set of discussions go well beyond local and into state levels and national levels? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edmund. K.L. Williams. Please introduce yourself to the commissioners, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, ma'am. Hello, I'm K.L. Williams. I'm the director of the Institute of Justice and Accountability. We deal in police, community relations, and our motto is building bridges. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. That's from James Baldwin. You know, police officers are one of the few professions that officers and individuals run toward the gunfire. That's what officers do, not from it. Law enforcement is one of the few professions where individuals are willing to risk their lives to save people they don't even know. That's a special kind of person. But one thing we have to keep in mind is that we have a tremendous challenge in front of us, not only here locally, but around the country, and that is we are dealing with an erosion of trust, an erosion of trust between law enforcement and the community. And if you think about it, if you didn't trust your spouse, if you didn't trust your significant other, what kind of relationship would you have at home? Well, that's the relationship that we feel in the community right now. That lack of trust is having a devastating impact on our community. And one thing we have to make sure officers keep in mind is that they will be held accountable. They will be held accountable for their actions, and they will be held accountable for the things that they do. But we as citizens and officers must work together and find common ground. Black lives matters, all lives matters. We are a society, and as a society, we must believe and continue to understand that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And we have to work together to find solutions to these challenges. We have to be ready to step up to the plate, and we have to be ready to answer and ask some tough questions and be honest enough to give tough answers. Because a lot of times people are not willing to reach that deep into their soul to reveal the things that are there. You know, I have been involved in law enforcement well over 25 years, and I don't like a policeman pulling in behind me now, under any circumstances. I still got memories, and it's a challenge. Thank you.
If you can keep it under 2 minutes, we do have time for both of you individuals. Please state your name and your city or organization and where you are from.
I'm Scotty Addison. You've known me from afar for a number of weeks. And this is a hard thing to address. I was an applicant for the research and policy management job that came up in January and into February that then segued into an RFP for data management services because the enabling for real hiring here was not really in place. And when this came up, I felt like, as I might have written, something of destiny, because I've had my feet on these grounds for a long time and a lot of skills to put into it. The process has been really arduous and opaque. And I understood really well what was required in terms of the essential task of synthesizing all this public input and best professional knowledge and practices, synthesizing that into an agenda. And the job really needed to get done, and the delays have really compromised that job. The RFP was issued last month, and it's been in gestation for a while. I had actually considered coming today and withdrawing my application because it's gotten to the point with that job so critical. Basically, you're making that person either the mule or the goat in how this process works out and the outcome of this commission's work. And I got a call today from the state. Liz Palazzolo, who's the buyer for the state on this contract, informed me that now the RFP has been canceled and that the commission is reassessing how this work is supposed to get done. We've had no disclosure at all about the methodologies that are going into this, how this stuff is getting synthesized, what thought process is going into it. And so I want to express my disappointment with this whole process. To be honest, it's been very unprofessional, and I ask you to reassess your reassessment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, if you could please.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Burke. I live in the city. I own the City Studio Dance Center, and in some ways, more importantly, I'm a commissioner on the Regional Arts Commission. I am disappointed that there aren't, and I know it's not your issue, but that there aren't any active artists on this commission. Arts have historically broken barriers in ways that we could not have. I had the privilege of dancing with Catherine Dunham and being in her company, and it forever informed my life. And I'm on the Diversity Awareness Partnership Board. But to dance with people who couldn't sleep or eat, you can't ever forget that. And it's very disturbing to me that we're not using the arts through this commission, that you don't have someone, and I've tried different ways. You know, on the commission we have a lot of power, so we're trying through Dr. Wright, we're trying many ways to get someone on this commission to work with us. I also think I have a question that I keep working on. Who is at your dinner table? You know, having been a part of the Dunham family, our dinner table looks, well, it just looks much better than this commission. There's just everybody in the world, and we're all very enriched, and we all stay together. And I think that's a question, as you go along, that you might want to ask and think about is, who's at your personal dinner table? These meetings are great, but this doesn't really relationship build in deep and authentic ways. So I urge you to have dinner and have coffee or whatever it takes, but, you know, travel. We all went to Mexico. I mean, we got to lighten up a little. I mean, it's also about making friends and having relationships, and I think in the end, for me, that was the most invaluable. But the Dunham experience has forever changed my personal life. So please look into ways that you can include the arts, because we have really broken barriers through the arts. Thank you, and I hope I'm here to help if you need any any entrees or anything. I would be so happy to make it happen. There are many of us on the commission that would like to see this happen. And we do have a new executive director who happens to be African American, and we are extremely proud of that. It was a long search, so hopefully maybe she could be on your commission. I'm sure she would be not happy I just volunteered her. But thank you for listening.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments. I will now pass this on to the Reverend. Thank you.
Good evening. So this is the deal. I say this to my church folks sometimes on a light Sunday, like the Sunday after Easter. If it's a light crowd, then it's your responsibility being here to make up for the noise that your neighbor would have made if they were here. And for the record, I will note that this is the lightest crowd that we have had. This is the first time we've had a meeting here in the county seat. This is the 9th meeting of the commission. It's our 2nd meeting talking about racial equity and reconciliation. And it is the lightest crowd we have ever had about one of the most intractable issues that we have to discuss in our region. A region that we have found together is 42nd among the top 50 metropolitan communities across the United States in economic mobility. A region that we have found together has an 18-year life expectancy longer here in 63105 than it does in 63106 in North St. Louis. And yet, for this meeting, there are so many empty chairs that you can tell that we're not politicians, because good advanced people would have set a really small group of seats in the center so that it looked really crowded for all of these cameras. Would that we could have expected that when we discuss this issue that is more than relational, to be clear, that is more than who sits around our tables and more than who happens to go to our church, synagogue, or mosque. It is about equity and measurable outcomes as much as it is about relationships. And so we come so that at least those who are here and thus deputized to invite others into the conversation will have a bit of common vocabulary for the way forward. The pontificating preacher in front of you is Reverend Starsky Wilson. I have the opportunity to serve as co-chair of this commission. I have been excited about that responsibility, but I am concerned that as a region we have reached a bit of Ferguson fatigue. I am concerned that we have gotten so deep into discussions about issues and infrastructure and the capacities that we need in our respective organizations that we have forgotten that we got to this place because of police violence, brutality, and the need for accountability thereof. And in as much as we must address all of these root causes and chase them down, like the dogs that people like Dr. King call them, those 3 dogs of militarism, extreme poverty, and racism that continue to rack us in our communities and in our nation. While we must chase them, we must not forget that we got here because of a young man being gunned down in the middle of the street in his neighborhood walking to his grandmother's house. No matter what we think about that event, and because we have found along the road that as many of us who enjoy the privilege of middle classness, like me, or whiteness, like many gathered in this room, there are those who do not get to come to spaces and places like this. People who have come to 8 of our meetings, but for whatever reason, due to the intractable issues of transportation and difficulties of our region, that when we decide that this is such a regional discussion that we must come to the county seat, and such a regional discussion that we must go to South County, such a regional discussion that we must go to St. Charles, this is the first meeting they can't quite make it to. And we who believe enough to make it and are privileged enough to keep appointments on our own calendar because we determine when there's enough gas in the car to make it, have additional responsibility this day to take vocabulary from this room, to take experiences that come together in this place, to help others to know, yes, you should have been there, because this is your region and it is hurting. I am pleased that in order to help us with garnering that common language and perhaps going forth with greater zeal than that which has been shown in our region for the core issues over the course of the last 8 meetings. We have a friend, an expert, a leader for our region to guide us through the coming conversation. Mr. Rudy Nickens is an experienced facilitator, educator, and entrepreneur with a strong background in cultural diversity, business management, and community development. Currently, Mr. Nickens is Director of Equal Opportunity and Diversity Division of the Missouri Department of Transportation. He oversees the transportation workforce, ensuring that it follows the federal and state mandated statutes on diversity and affirmative action programs. Additionally, he's focused on initiatives to create an inclusive work environment for all employees. Previously, he served as the Executive Director of the St. Louis Black Repertory Company, the nation's largest professional African-American theater company. Prior to that, he was Vice President of St. Louis 2004, a civic organization created to act as a catalyst for community development. While with St. Louis 2004, he worked on initiatives related to workforce diversity, zero tolerance for hate, and ceasefire program to reduce youth and gang violence. Mr. Nickens has taught at the School of Communications and Media Studies as a member of the adjunct faculty for Webster University and has lent his skills as an educator to Planned Parenthood of St. Louis, as well as the National Conference of Community and Justice. For over 2 decades, he has consulted and educated and trained hundreds of local, national, and international organizations in the areas of workforce diversity, leadership development, cultural competence, and conflict resolution. He specializes in leading efforts on eliminating the effects of internalized racism and eliminating sexism and violence against women. Mr. Nickens was a Rockefeller Foundation's Next Generation Leadership Fellow. Most recently, he received the Ethics Project's inaugural Ambassador Andrew Young Award for Outstanding Leadership. To guide us in a presentation on creating a community of equity, I invite you to welcome, since y'all are a clapping crowd, Mr. Rudy Nickens.
Wherever you want to be. commissioners, director, audience members, it is a pleasure to be here to share this evening with you. Rich, if you thought it was hard following those young people, think about what it's like following Starsky, the pontificating preacher. But of all the things, the very kind things that Starsky said about me, and I appreciate them all, the one that I value the most is the word friend. That's what matters most to me. So as Starsky said, my name is Rudy Nickens. I am volunteering with the Ferguson Commission for this year with the support of the Missouri Department of Transportation to allow me to spend time away from my desk in Jefferson City and to be in St. Louis and to help think about these issues and to work very closely with Bethany and the staff of the Ferguson Commission, who is a real treat to get to work with. This is meant to be a conversation tonight. This is meant to be a chance for the commissioners to think about some common language, as Starsky and Rich said. This is meant for us to move into small groups and have dialogue with the skilled and volunteer facilitators who have lent their time this evening to come. So I'm gonna just walk through some of the key concepts that we put together for the community and for the commissioners to think about and lead us to where we hope to go. This evening, the overview includes why is the commission doing this at all? Why is this important? Remembering to have some common language about definitions of racial equity and the pieces that underlie it. Thinking about a few very strategic goals that the commissioners and the commission and the community might take on, and then some recommendations that are emerging from the working group. This group, just like all the other areas of the commission's work, has put together teams of people who are volunteering their time and talent to help think about what it is that can help not just satisfy the issues of the executive order, but really move our community forward in meaningful ways. You know, we are here because disparities associated with race continue to be a significant part of our life experience. That you can measure, that Starsky talked about zip codes and life expectancies. There is no area of our lives that we can't look at the differences that race plays in the outcomes of our lives, from health to wealth to education to incarceration to involvement with the criminal justice system to every aspect of having a good life. There's a measure that our racial identity can play in those outcomes. And the commission in its work was charged to look at what are the root causes, what happened in Ferguson last August, and what happened in the community that set it off in the way that it happened. And one of the things that we have to look at through all the dimensions is the way that race plays out in that. If you were here for the last Ferguson Commission meeting, we had a representative from the W.H. Kellogg Foundation who began to introduce language around racial equity. It's really important that we look at not just feelings and attitudes, but really looking at a bigger picture and a goal of understanding what racial equity means. What does it mean to move toward a community where fairness and justice are the hallmarks of what our work is? It describes the work and actions that designed to address the historic burdens that people have carried. Racial equity accomplished by identifying the systemic discriminatory policies and actions and behaviors that have led to some of the disparities that we speak of today. And then a community that embraces racial equity also looks at identifying systemic remedies. It's not just identifying the problem, but it also is like, what do you do about it? How do you look at it in a deep and meaningful way and introduce actions that address changes in that formula? Again, I want to build on continue to haul out the work of the wonderful Kellogg Foundation presentation from last month, because it gave us some language that I think we need to hold on to. So racial equity isn't something that people talk about a whole lot. Note these differences between diversity and inclusion and equality, and then what racial equity is. You know, diversity is what we got. We always have had it. We have always been. In any room, we're a diverse group of people. In every room, we're a diverse group of people, because diversity measures all the ways that our humanness shows up in our age, in our gender, in our sexual orientation, in our color, in our religion, in our family background. All that makes us diversity. And it's just about noticing the dimensions of humanness. And racial equity is not the same as inclusion. Diversity is kind of a noun. Inclusion is a bit of a verb, where you start to think about what do you do with the diversity around you, and how do you harness that diversity into making organizations function better, and using the different backgrounds and talents that people have to come up with stronger solutions in your organizations. And racial equity is not the same as talking about equality. It's not about treating everybody the same or wanting everybody to be the same. In fact, difference is a value, it's an asset, it's not a deficit. And so we're not just looking at doing the sameness or giving everyone the same thing, because what might work for you might not be the same as the work for your neighbor. And everyone has to have solutions that are uniquely addressed to where they are along this line. So racial equity, the thing that we're moving toward in this project, are looking at what does it mean to have a community where fairness and justice are the outcomes that we're going after. That's a big, big, big thing, and that's the goal we want people to wrap their minds around. What does it mean to have a totally just society, not one that everybody's the same, or just counting the ways that we vary from each other. So we talk about race all the time. We talk about it and we talk about it. And one of the things that we should note is that, and I'm not asking for your agreement on any of this, just so you know, this is not about saying I want everybody to think the same, but the commission deserves and desires to be transparent, to let you know what they think and what they're operating under, and what the sort of belief system that they carry. And so one of the things to talk about when we talk about race, you know, we wholly subscribe to the idea that there is but one race. We wholly subscribe to the reality that we are, all of us, 99.9% identical in our DNA, in our genetic makeup. That there's no basis, there's no scientific basis for race as we understand it these days. What we're talking about is race in our world as a social construct, something that got created for the purposes of originally a benign concept just for classification that has evolved into something that has a power dynamic and equity and disequity associated with it. And as I said earlier, race is unfortunately far too reliable a predictor of the outcomes of a person's life in our society. We don't want to think that it is, but it is still quite accurate in many ways. It doesn't just talk about every one single outcome, you know, but it is a big factor. Now, what's the difference between race and racism? So, racism is the belief that some races are inherently superior to each other, but not exclusively that. That's the first part of the definition of racism. Because does anyone believe that we don't all have some biases? Of course we do. Nobody, not one of us, grew up in a society where we got treated or taught to believe that all people were valuable and that there was not some better or worse, more important, more valuable, more intelligent, more good, more powerful, less, etc. So all of us got some biases. It would be impossible not to have gotten some. So racism isn't just about having biases. It's the biases coupled with the systemic, and that's the most important part of it, institutional policies and practices that have authorized those biases and enforced that belief system into systems that allow for disparate outcomes in our lives. So the formula that people always will give you is racism equals prejudice plus power. It's not just prejudice. Anybody can be prejudiced, and all of us probably are. It is that prejudice which is endowed by the system that we live in that says the identities on this side of it are more valuable, more important, more intelligent, more beautiful, more good, more deserving than others. And given the power by the institutions, by the society, to enforce those differences. There are many dimensions of racism, but the one I want to make sure that I speak to is like racism is not about an individual set of feelings. Many people get confused. So if I say, let's talk about racism, you say I called you a racist. That's not what it's about. It's not about looking at what your feelings or my feelings or attitudes about. When we want to talk about racism in the ways that it shows up in systemic and institutional manners, not just feelings and attitudes. It's not just looking at the individual ways that we got hurt or we got trained or our minds got conditioned to believe things about each other, but what are the ways, the institutional, systemic, structural, cultural, and environmental dimensions of racism. You know, institutional, any system of inequity based on race can occur. You know, that you gotta look at what we've endowed our systems with, what policies and practices are in our environment that cause racist outcomes, from where we locate hazardous materials and in communities and neighborhoods. Why is it that we are more familiar with and value some cultural practices, beliefs, and attitudes than others? Why is it that we're familiar with some and not of others, and deemed some correct and some incorrect, or some good and some not good? There's a whole set of those things that we have to wrap our minds around to understand the many dimensions that racism is, and not so much thinking just about how I feel about you or you feel about me. That's interesting. And of course, it's really better when we treat each other. It's great, as the young people said, when we treat each other well. That song they sang today was awesome. And that was really good. Getting at our hearts and minds is critical work for doing this. I wholly appreciate that. But this work and the work of the commission isn't just making sure we like each other and making sure that we can do what's the term, the kumbaya things. It's about making sure that we are working within, checking the policies and the systems that we are endowed with in our community that affect the people's lives. It was one of the questions that Bethany spoke with earlier from the last presentation about should this commission's work strive for a colorblind society. I don't remember exactly how it was phrased. And there was an overwhelming response that said, no, that's not a good goal to have. And that's great progress. I just want to say that at least in the room of the people who showed up last month and hopefully beyond in our community, people no longer hold out that a colorblind society is a good goal to have. Because what we have learned, that what people have done with that belief that color blindness means, is that it trivializes and it makes invisible who we are as people. And it's also rooted in, when you say colorblind, what it means is can't we all be the same, right? And when we say that, we don't use the word, but can't we all be the same means can't we all be white? Can't we all act like the white people act? Because they have defined what good behavior is. Can't we all do that? And a colorblind society is one that doesn't recognize. It's rigid, and it doesn't have any positive belief that race is really important. Can any of you leave your race outside this room? If I ask you to go on outside and come back in here and be your gender, be your age, but leave your race behind, you can't do that, right? You can't separate yourselves like that. Nobody can. And so when we treat people like, well, I didn't notice that you had a color, there's a quite, not a thoughtful thing to say to anybody. And to minimize the effect of the dailiness of having a lived experience around race makes it difficult to engage with people around this work. Let me back, going too fast. You with me? So I'm going to move into this next slide. I already moved to it, so that's one called microaggressions. I just want to say a little bit about it before well, the definition's up there, but what's most important around putting this in this presentation is it's not just, our work isn't just the policy, the de jure and de facto policies of our society. Those are important, and those continue to be corrective, be corrected, things that we're looking at. We have done a tremendous job of most of at least the legal remedies that we could do through the Civil Rights era. Some work on the de facto behaviors that we need to work on. Still a lot more to do in there because the de jure policies that we corrected didn't line up to all of a sudden now everything goes well. One of the ways that things stay in place right now, though, the disparities stay in place or the racism is experienced these days, is those little things. It's the daily little things that people endure. It's the daily assaults on their intelligence, on their beauty, on their goodness, on their value, on their culture, on their family, on their identity. It's none of it, it's the stuff that's against the law. It's not against the law to treat someone like they don't matter. You can't arrest someone for setting up an institution where people don't feel wanted or welcome, or they don't see themselves reflected in leadership, or where their heritage or their culture isn't identifiable as important. That's not illegal, is it? But it does send the message, and it does train people to believe that I don't matter. And microaggressions is probably the most, one of the biggest pieces of work that we get to do right now is to look at what are all the little pieces in my world, the little pieces in my office, the pieces in my school, the pieces in my neighborhood that I send messages to you that suggest that you are less than, that suggest that you're not as valuable, where you don't even see yourself represented. One of the greatest microaggressions that we have is just leaving people out altogether. So if you don't see people who look like you, who share your identity, who have your background, who have your experience at every level of the organization, the message gets in that I really don't matter in this place. There are many kinds of microaggressions, microaffirmations, microassaults. There are many dimensions of them, but some of them are intentional and most of them are unintentional. Almost, what's really hardest to deal with is the ones that, well, it's easy to identify the racist behavior where people actually called it out, named it ugly things. It's those things that look sweet, that sound kind. The language. I don't know if white people know this, but I'll just say this one right now. So one of the microaggressions that many African heritage people are sensitive about is, wow, You are so articulate. Yeah, you know that? You know it's not a compliment? You know that? Do you know that's not a compliment? Because what that suggests is I looked at you and I expected you to be stupid. And you opened your mouth and you were smart. I can't believe it. Right, Felicia? Absolutely, yeah. Now, most white people, when they say, wow, you're so articulate, didn't think they were being thoughtless or insensitive, did they? They thought they were being complimentary. And unless you understand the weight and the background that goes with certain parts of language and behavior, you wouldn't even know. And most people won't bother to tell you. And there are millions of daily little things like that. Little things like that, none of which, in and of themselves, you would consider a cause for discrimination. But the accumulation of them has a serious effect on people, on their psyche, on their health, on their attention, on their ability to perform, on their willingness to participate and show up. It's the daily little things that we also have to be vigilant about. So we've got, oops, I skipped over the discrimination. You all know what that is, right? I mean, we've been dealing with that one for a long time, and much of the Ferguson Commission's work is about, as Starsky put it earlier, you know, what happened. There was some discriminatory behavior that led to the outcome that brought this team together. We have to really always understand that as well. And some of the discrimination has a racial component to it. Not all, but some. Okay. So now we're going to talk for a couple of concepts, a couple of minutes, that's going to talk about what we're doing tonight in our small groups. So most people have at least heard this concept of white privilege, right? It's not a new concept anymore. And we're saying white privilege because we're talking about race, but you know there's privilege for all of our identities depending on what conversation you have. So I understand that as a man, I have male privilege. I understand that I live in a society where Christian hegemony exists, and so as a Christian person, you know, I get a lot of privilege from my life as a Christian man. And I get that there's privilege that I have as a person who is living without any obvious disabilities. I understand that in all parts of our identities, we have certain sets of privileges. And in fact, all of us have both the experience of being targeted by some form of discrimination as well as receiving privilege of some form of it. And it's really important that we look at that comprehensively, because if we're gonna look at identifying the key pieces of white privilege, we also get to own that there's more than just that kind of privilege, and that we go back and forth between knowing what privilege looks like and not knowing what it looks like, depending on which conversation that we're in. So we're focusing on white privilege because this is a conversation about race, but I want you to continue to translate this throughout your life experiences about what other kinds of privileges do you have? What other kinds of privileges based on your sexual orientation, your age, your economic background, your religion, all of it, it matters in understanding this part of the conversation. So white privilege, though, for the sake of this meeting, is about the societal privileges that white people receive that people of the global majority do not. I use the term people of the global majority in place of the term minority as a way to remind people that people of color are the supermajority of the occupants of the planet. That we get called minorities in certain communities, but the reality is 85% of the world is people of color. And to use the word minority is actually a mistake. So white people receive a lot of benefits and privileges, access to organizations, access to institutions, historical advantages, inherited wealth, all sorts of things that they didn't ask for, and they didn't earn, and sometimes didn't even want, but they still are an invisible net of support that makes life easier in many ways. It's that unearned part of it. And it's not that anything you have you shouldn't have. It's just that how you think about it is what's important. We're not asking people not to have good lives. We're saying not to think that everything you got just because of your own effort. It's part of the, the myth of meritocracy that we grew up with in the United States, those of us who live in the United States. You know the story that you got told when you were in the 3rd grade? You know, the one that if you work hard, if you try hard, if you apply yourself, you too can have it all. And that everything you got because of your hard work. That does not include an analysis of the benefits and privileges that were allowed to you that other people didn't get to have. It doesn't mean that you haven't worked hard your whole life. I'm sure you have. But do you know how many doors you got in just because of your skin color? How many boardrooms you got accepted into just because of your skin color? How many admissions to schools that you got in that your skin color wasn't used against you? It's a whole range of things that includes the privilege. And we get to look at that. Similarly, for people of the global majority, we also get to look at what are the messages that got into our minds about ourselves and people like us that we have bought into, and what are the behaviors and patterns and practices that we have developed that actually work against our own best interest. What are the ways that we have bought into the myth of white supremacy? Some people call internalized racism internalized white supremacy. What are the ways that we have believed that white people are better, smarter, stronger, more important, more valuable, more intelligent, more good than people of color are? What are the ways that we can look at other people of color and not think that they're capable of success, leadership, trustworthy? What are the images that we have about who we are as people, individually and as a group of people, that have gotten into our minds? And I guarantee you that nobody lives in this society without having bought some of it. It's impossible not to have bought at least some of it, the belief that racism has defined who we are and that some people are better than others, including that about ourselves. And so the work for white people is looking at what are those things that I don't even pay attention to that I get every day in my life that can be associated with my racial identity. And the work for people of color is what are the things, what are the behaviors that I engage in every day of my life that are not in my own best interest? What are the ways that I'm doing things from so let me give you, let's see. So, so every time I choose chitlins over tofu, if I actually know that one of the things that will contribute to my illness, to my early death, are things that I ingest, but I ingest those things because I believe they define authentic blackness, then I will do those things. If I believe that this is a part of my culture and I have to do it, regardless of the fact that I know hypertension kills and this contributes to that, that is one of the ways you can look at, what am I doing that's not in my own best interest? What are the ways that if I believe that I'm not very smart because I went to a school that said I'm not very smart, And I started to believe it. If every day I went someplace and they said, little black child, you can't do these things, and I say, yes, I can, and I do them the best I can, but one day I buy it and I give up. And I say, you're right. So the system of racism gets at you, and then some of the stuff sticks to you. And if enough of it sticks to you, then you develop patterns and behaviors that are against you having the life that you deserve and want to have. So we get to look at, without blame, because that's really important, the insidiousness of it is that these things happen to us not once, not twice, but daily. In every institution that we interact with, the information comes at us about who we are and what we're worth. So it's never helpful to blame people for their difficulties. What we want to do is understand what those difficulties are and figure out how we give each other the hand that we do to step outside of those behaviors. But never to criticize or blame each other for the places where we got hurt and acted out certain things. Some of the definitions that you'll see in here, there's a lot of research about it. Negative effects of the mental and physical wellness, addictions, probably one of the key aspects of what you see because of internalized racism. And I think in the last decade or so, you start seeing more language around the health things as classifying it as a trauma. Like I think it was Joy DeGruy who called it traumatic post-slavery syndrome, for instance. So we're starting to see more of the mental health consequences and definitions of it. And so now we're talking about our work tonight. And because we have had some different experiences in the dailiness of racism, though we've all experienced racism, but the ways we've experienced it have been different. Sometimes we have to have time together in different groups to be able to dialogue about that. And some of the data that the commission needs to capture is data that can only be captured from these breakout groups that are organized somewhat around racial lines. You know, the truth is, almost all of any group we have is going to be a mixed heritage group, right? I mean, it's kind of impossible not to think that we all have many lineages within us. And so when we're doing these caucuses and we separate around race, we're doing race the social construct. We're doing race, what is your daily lived experience around this? Recognizing the similarities and the humanness that makes us all connected. But for the sake of gathering information and really understanding racism, sometimes we have to have conversations separately. Separation is never the goal, it's a strategy. Building diverse, connected communities is what we want. But from time to time, we have to break into small groups because there are some things that people of the global majority are just not going to say in front of white people. But this needs to be captured in the records as well. And there's some things that white people are not going to say around people of color either. And it also needs to be captured. No movement can be complete unless everybody's voice gets in there. So you have to create safe, workable scenarios where that can happen. So we're going to move in a minute into these race groups, these racial caucuses. But I want to remind you that when you go to yours, it's about your lived experience as a white person or your lived experience as a person of the global majority. The psychological and psychosocial effects of racism on white people are really important to look at, because did anybody think that white people aren't hurt by racism? Absolutely, white people are hurt by racism. even though the system allows for certain opportunities and advantages, systemic economic advantages and stuff, the damage on people's humanness is really important. So all of us, people of color and white people, have all been badly hurt because of the presence of racism, all of us. The hurts look different, the manifestations look different, and we get to come together in our different groups to examine those. So I'm going to move toward the sort of the finale part of this, is to look for the commission about what we're trying to accomplish. For the commission, I ask that the commission make sure that people leading this are educated about the issues. It is really, really important that the commissioners stand on sort of legitimate platform of we are people who do this work as we lead this work. And there has to be an ongoing opportunity for the commissioners to dialogue about it, to learn from each other, to learn from the community, to be engaged in opportunities to understand the depth of racism. That even though there is this working group on racial equity that has been developed, it's not just the racial equity work group's job to think about the outcomes of racism. Every one of the working groups needs to have a lens and an analysis to identify what the effects of racism have had in its work, not just leave it to the task force on race to do this, but every single dimension of the work has to include how does racism play out among that. And modeling, you know, it's what does it say? It's 10% of what you say and 90% of what you do that people pay attention to. You got to live it, not just at the commission meetings, but you got to live it. You have to internalize these principles. You have to show up at the public meetings, of course, but you have to live and model this all the time. So we're trying to find and identify resources for the commissioners to have ongoing educational opportunities around the topics. And we also trying to help make sure that the commission is thinking about public meetings and how language and representation show up and what behaviors that we do that suggest openness and inclusion and valuing differences among people and not just staying, okay, this is all we care about. The working groups, we have a couple of specific questions for each of the working groups to delve into. Who does this recommendation benefit? That's one of the questions that each working group should look at in the recommendations that they're proffering to the executive order. And does this recommendation differentially impact racial groups? Because sometimes you'll look like a race-neutral policy, but the policy will have different outcomes for different communities. So you want to look at, is there a differential impact on different communities that this seemingly neutral policy offers? We asked the working groups, is cultural competence a core part of the institutions involved? And if not, what trainings or partnerships are needed to ensure that it is so? And in what ways are we looking at the historical wealth gap as it plays out around this topic? Some of our visions for the community include a community where every citizen has equal access to all benefits and privileges of this society. Increased diverse community engagement and participation at all levels. And finally, a focus on healing needs to be adopted. So you heard, if those of you who were here before who paid attention to the writings on the STL Positive Change website, have seen the work of the Kellogg Foundation and America Heals work. One of the things that I say and that we're trying to suggest is, unless people do the necessary work to heal the hurts of racism, the actions that we engage in don't actually take root. We've had many strategies, many strategies to try to undo and redress some of the outcomes of racism, but sometimes we fall short partially because we haven't had a chance to do the work that we need to do as individuals to heal from the places that we got hurt. And we end up acting out on each other or within a group those painful things. And so we have to do a strategy and techniques and tools to address healing the hurts of racism as a part of a successful outcome. If you don't, if you just work from a place of being hurt and just working from pain, it doesn't actually get the results that we're going for. A few recommendations that we've started with are to build the capacity of regional organizations who focus on social justice. As in the letter that Rena Hajat-Carroll read earlier, there are some really great models of leadership in our community who have been at this for decades. Most of them don't have the kind of infrastructure or capacity to have the real impact that the community needs in order to make this happen in a really big way. And so one of the things that needs to happen is to what can we do to back and support and build the capacity of those organizations to do the work that they're doing so that we can really see the kind of outcomes that they vision. Establish community-wide activities that focus on accomplishments. Because from time to time it always looks like, God, we got so far to go. Oh, we have so far to go. But we have done some things too. We have figured out some things, and we have to stop from time to time and note those so that we have, it actually fortifies us to continue to do the work where we can stop and note the progress that we've made and the accomplishments that are out there. And, the commission is only commissioned for a minute or two, right, in the long thing. But the Kellogg presentation last week was a great reminder that if you're not in this for a generation, you may as well go home. If you're not willing to commit resources and time and talent they define the generation as 25 years, I believe. If you're not in this for a complete generation, the changes that we envision will not have a chance to be successful. And so the commission, while it's the commission, needs to also develop a plan of sustainability so that the resources that are needed, the leadership that's required, whatever infrastructure is going to take to make this a buy-in by the community that is here, not just till September when you give your work to the legislators or the end of this calendar year, but for the long haul. And so part of what the commission gets to do is to work on how to make that happen. So sustainability or not, because if you're not willing for that, we can go home. I mean, there's other things. We could be at the baseball game tonight this afternoon with the other people who didn't want to be here today. That's why they're not here, Starsky, just because it was the home opener. Don't. That's all. Come on, it's Cardinal Nation. What'd you expect? That's the only reason. It's not the topic. It's not anything else but that. I'm trying to, because I'm the hopeful guy. You know that, right? At all times. So those are some of the recommendations that we're moving forward. So I thank you, and then I'd love if the commissioners have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
And with this, we want to limit it to maybe 2, if possible, if we can.
None is fine with me. I got no problem with that. Great. All right. Thank you.
1 second.
Thank you, Rudy. If you could talk a little bit about how the progression from racial caucus groups to further discussions might occur, because I think we've had some questions about, is this the right strategy? Do we do this? Why are we doing this? And so I think talking about it as a strategy, not the goal, and talking about the progression just a moment might be helpful.
Great. Okay. Happy to. So I don't know how many groups there'll be or who the facilitators are. 4 groups. And there are questions that the facilitators will guide the conversation around. It's about creating a space, as safe a space as possible, for people to be able to be honest and open about their thoughts and feelings around this. Everyone has to decide to take a risk if they will, and participate at their own level. But it's just one of the things that we do. It's just one. Last month, when we introduced the topic of racial equity, the groups were mixed race groups, and that gives you some data in that way. We're trying to find as many different ways to capture information and capture data so that we can have as comprehensive a picture as possible. I don't think that anybody on this team is trying to set up a divided St. Louis. We already have hyper-segregated enough communities. And in many ways, having racial caucuses is not unfamiliar to any of us. It's something that happens almost every day in every workplace, in every school, and in most churches. It's not so unfamiliar to us. It's just we don't hardly ever say it. We don't hardly ever use it as an intentional strategy. We just say it, well, my neighborhood's all white, my neighbors are all white, my family's all white, my faith community's all white, my school's all white, and it's just so. But when we name it, then all of a sudden it's scary, or it's divisive, or it's challenging. It's just for this purpose, it's information gathering. And it's important information to gather. And hopefully, for the people of the global majority and for the white people who are here, it'll create an atmosphere for people to just have, for a short time, a dialogue around this where we don't have to be as careful. Because I know that there are white people who want to think out loud but are afraid of coming off as bigoted or biased or racist or offensive, and so it silences them. And I know that there are people of the global majority who are afraid to show their anger or their rage or their fear or their grief because they don't want to be perceived the way that that shows up. So it's helpful to have a strategy where you can control for that for a little bit. And we always come back together as a group. It's not the goal. It's just a temporary strategy that we use, but always the goal is to come back as a unified group, a unified team. That answer it? Great.
All right, one other. I mean, if there's one, you can take one more. If there's another, but the last one.
Just short question, Rudy. Are we working on the policies and practices that show up in institutional systemic during these breakouts? Are we working on our individual experiences and hurt part? It seems like there are two things.
Yeah, there are two things. I think tonight's conversation is individual. I haven't seen, I should have thanked Kira Banks, Dr. Kira Banks, who's in the house somewhere, who has been my partner along with Bethany and working on this process for all along. And Kira's taken the lead in developing the breakout questions. This is about, in this breakout tonight, it is about individual attitudes, behaviors, and feelings. It's not about the institutions tonight. We will certainly have to do more of that, but tonight is the personal. And it should always be the personal. I should just say that. You can't really do institutional change unless you first do a critical self-examination of who you are and what you think and how you show up. It's sort of about that, it's always about me first, and then me in the community, and then me in a society. So first you gotta get an honest and thoughtful perspective on who you are and what you bring to this process. Great.
Thank you. That's the last, or if any commissioners have any other questions, that would be the last one. All right, thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Nickens.
you.
I'm going to get out of the way. Dr. Kira Banks is going to give us guidance as we transition into our caucus groups. I just wanted to make one clarifying comment. Rudy referenced working groups. One of the things that my co-chair Rich and I kind of determined was that this would not be an area where we siloed out a working group in the same way that we have some others, but we would honor that this is something that cuts across all groups. And so those who have noted before, the staff has been in conversation with folks from NCCJ, with Diversity Awareness Partnership, from the YWCA and others, with Dr. Banks and with Rudy to put together some some things for us to think about. Some of those recommendations you have already heard, and they will continue to help and support and guide us as we apply a racial equity lens to all of our working groups. So we thought this so universal and important a topic that it will cut across all areas. So when he says working group, in one sense, he's talking about that group of professionals who do this work on a daily basis, who are informing the work of the commission, not that there's another standing working group as we have with economic inequity and opportunity and the like. So just wanted to clarify that for folks and have that affirmation. But with that, Dr. Kira Banks will come and give us guidance on our racial caucus groups.
Good evening. I want to first thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this process, and then also thank the skilled facilitators. So one of the things that was mentioned that was needed was skilled facilitation around this conversation. And I just want to say we have some of the best facilitators in the town, in the city, that are here with us that have been this month and last month. So thank you all for giving your time. I also want to commend the commission, really, for doing the bold work of modeling what this work can look like, right? So last month we did integrated mixed race groups. This month we're doing caucus groups. And you heard a little bit from Rudy about the thought process behind that. And I would encourage those of you who are curious about some more of the theory to, that you can Google same race caucusing. There's some articles written on it. But just from the research perspective, want to let you know that research suggests that those sorts of safe spaces, or what we might even call brave spaces, can actually increase people's confidence and competence for having the across-group interactions, right? So we also have research to suggest that they do not increase prejudice. Sometimes people worry about that. Well, if we get in our own groups, we'll increase the divisiveness. No, actually, we have research to suggest that it doesn't increase prejudice. It increases people's confidence and competence to have the intergroup interactions that we hope that they will have, and that we will create a space for them to have. So just to say, it's really should be commended that you were willing to take that bold step. With that, I just want to suggest that we move to our spaces with that in mind, that both the within group and across group spaces can move our dialogue forward and heal some of those divisions that we've spent a lot of time talking about. I think the way that we have set up is that, let me make sure I'm saying this correctly, that we have the white caucus groups at the blue and the orange spaces, and as Rudy would say, people of the global majority, or people of color, who identify as people of color, at the purple and the green boards. And so if you can move to those spaces, your facilitators will lead you through a number of exercises, and then we will come back together.
So again,
oh, you'll need to grab some chairs to make space around the boards.
So green is here, purple there, orange and blue toward the staircase.